How's Glade today?
Too bad. How are you?
Doing well. Watching the wind blow.
Yeah, hasn't that been the case this last month?
Yeah, it's been bad.
My bees haven't made a drop of honey. Shouldn't say that, but they're they're not making anything.
No, it's been very slow. I've been pretty disappointed so far.
Yeah, me too. It's April looked pretty good, and then all of a sudden it just May was just a complete complete dud.
Yeah, I've still got a couple hives I'm feeding.
Some of my small hives, I'm doing the same thing. I'm feeding. They don't they don't have anything. They'd be dead if I didn't feed them.
Yep. Yep, I actually lost that hive earlier. That kind of I think I messaged you about it, and that's what I finally came up with. That was starvation because it had capped brood, and some cells were perforated like it looked like foul brood. And when I got to looking at it, there was white larvae underneath them and no foul brood signs. So and the bees were dead in the cells, and yeah, so I learned a lesson there.
In a weird year, that's for sure. Just odd that, here it is June and we're having to feed bees.
Yeah,
I need to go check some of my small ones again and see if they see if they need more. End up feeding bees all summer long. Not gonna make it honey. It's either cold or windy or hot and windy or both.
yeah,
Can't believe we're supposed to hit what, like 99 tomorrow.
yeah, that looks hot.
The day I want to go out and graft some queens and start raising some queens are going to be just miserable hot.
Yeah, that's what I was actually I was going to try to start mine this weekend.
My plan was to start them tomorrow, do the grafting tomorrow, and then next weekend they should be, the cells would be ready to drop into another hive, drop into a hive, and then hopefully by 2 weeks later, I would hopefully have laying queens again.
Yeah. How many days after grafting do you usually pull the cells out?
I usually pull them 10 days after. So that puts them, if you're grafting on day 4, essentially, if you're getting day old larvae, and you pull them 10 days later, so now you're at day 14. And
Yep.
queens will merge, have 16 days. So that gives you a day to, a little bit of play there, because sometimes when it's warm, they can actually emerge in 15 days, not 16.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, I was actually thinking 9 days, but yeah, maybe I'll wait 10.
You can do it in 9. I just do it 10, just because that's what Michael Palmer's schedule is. I kind of follow his method for raising queens. I've done it for the last few years. I like it. Seems to work. I seem to get nice queens out of it. So
Yeah.
it's not the only way to do it by any means, but
Yeah. I'm going to give this cloak board a try. I've got all the stuff to do it, so I'm going to try it out. Takes a little bit of manipulating the hive, but a couple days of that.
well, so does Michael Palmer's method. So the initial setup, and I don't know if you've looked at his method,
I haven't.
Basically, he takes a really strong hive and adds a box of capped brood to it. So he takes a really strong hive and throws in like 8 more frames of capped brood and just makes this monster hive out of it.
Oh wow, lots of nurse bees.
So there's just gobs of nurse bees. And he sets that up about 10 or 11 days prior to putting in his grafts. And then he drops all those frames in there that have got capped brood in it that's just about ready to emerge. And in 10, 11 days, he's got just gobs and gobs of nurse bees, right?
Yeah.
And then the morning he wants to graft, the day he wants to graft, in the morning, he takes that monster hive and just slides it over on the hive stand and then turns it around so the entrance is facing the opposite direction. And then he pulls off. So he put these extra brood frames on top of this big hive. And then he pulls basically all those brood frames that he added. And he usually pulls like an extra box there that's mostly food, like mostly honey and pollen. And he pulls those off and sets them back down on a bottom board in the original position, facing the original direction. And then the hardest part is you've got to go through all of the brood area, anywhere there's been brood. So the box that you added all the brood to, you've got to go through it frame by frame, shake the bees off, and make sure that they haven't started a queen cell on it.
Yep.
Because you've made this just monster hive out of everything. You've got to go through the original hive's brood chamber and do the same thing. Make sure that they haven't started extra queen cells, because really what you've done is you've created a hive that wants to swarm.
Yep.
But you've created a hive that wants to make queens and has all the nurse bees to do it. So now you've got, your really strong hive is still there. It's just slid over and the entrance is facing the wrong direction. So now all of the foragers are going to come back to the original location. Plus you've got all these nurse bees that you've added 7 or 8 frames of nurse bees to the thing, and you've reduced it down to like 2 boxes. And now these 2 boxes that are in the original hive's location it's just boiling with bees, but they're all nurse bees. And he does that in the morning, and then he comes back in the afternoon and drops his grafts in that hive. So now what you've got is a hive that has all nurse bees. They have no brood because it's all emerged out, or just about. They have no brood to raise any kind of queen with. And you've left them for a couple of hours, so they know they're broodless, they're queenless. And now you drop in, how many ever cells you're going to drop in there. In my case, I'm going to drop 30 cells in there. And you got this monster hive, and they only have 30 cells to take care of.
Yeah.
And now they go like mad and just feed those cells. It's crazy. So now you're getting well-fed larvae to make queens out of. And for me, it's worked really quite well. And
I bet.
I like it. And then after you've got those cells, once they start to draw those cells out, he goes back like a week later, and most of those cells are going to be capped by that time. And puts everything back together. So he moves the original hive back to the original location, flips it back around, puts these boxes back on top of that original hive, over a queen excluder, just to make sure he doesn't have a queen running around where he doesn't want.
Yeah.
So in his case, he usually has 2 queen excluders, one for the original hive, keeping her down, and a second one that's just really as insurance. And then he lets them finish out those cells. And then right before they emerge, like the day or 2 days before they emerge out of their cells, he goes and harvests all those queen cells and drops those queen cells in the hives he wants to requeen, and away they go. Wait for them to emerge and then go mate.
Yep, sounds a lot like the cloakboard method of similarities anyways.
I like it. I've gotten good queens out of it, so you'll have to know how the method works if you like it.
Yeah, I sure will.
Hey, Rochelle. Hey, Frank.
Now can you hear me?
I don't really have much in way of a presentation for tonight. I thought I'd kind of see how everybody's bees are doing. Mine are not making any honey. It's been too cold and windy, and now it's too hot and windy.
So have you grafted any queens yet?
No, Kate and I were just talking. I'm just about to do that. In fact, that's tomorrow's project. I've got my cell builder hive set up and ready to go. And tomorrow I'll go. We were just talking, some of my little hives I'm still feeding because there's not been anything for them to eat.
I've got 2 nukes. I got one in Duchesne and one in La Pointe, and I haven't been in them in a week or more. We've been in California for a week, so I assume I gave them each a gallon before I left, but I assume they've sucked that down and then some. So
you're probably going to want to check on those. And the small hives I've had, I fed them a gallon and I fed them another gallon, and they are starting to look better because they're converting. Well, I gave them some pollen sub too, and they're converting that to brood. So they're building up a little bit, but
they're not doing it on natural resources, huh?
We're not getting anything. I added some honey supers early, thinking, because April was looking pretty good. They were bringing stuff in and they were starting to fill a box, and I thought, well, I'm going to add you super, and then May hit and nothing, just nothing. And these little hives of mine all started to go backwards because they didn't have any food. So I started feeding and fed all my little hives. The bigger hives seemed to be okay. They seemed to have enough pollen, and they were able to gather enough resources in April to kind of get them through May. But man, it's been rough.
Yeah, it went from being really cold to really hot in about 2 days, kind of thing. So
and I don't know what the plants are going to do. All of the spring bloom's gone, obviously, and
well, here at my house, about a quarter of a mile away, there's a guy that planted some. He planted some grain and alfalfa last year. Grain is a nurse crop. I noticed there's quite a bit of clover in that field blooming now. So I haven't been in these hives here at the house for over a week. So I'm going to look and see if they're bringing anything in or not. But they're both pretty good sized hives. So earlier there was a lot of activity, but I noticed that I haven't been in to see if, I hope they haven't swarmed while I was gone to California.
the hive I was going to make as my cell builder hive, I went out to kind of get it set up. It had swarmed on me. I get looking at it. There's not 1 ounce of brood. There's no capped brood, there's no nothing. And population was okay, but I just kind of went, oh, well, I hope you've got a queen running around here. So I left him. I'm like, I'm gonna leave you for a week and see if you've got a virgin queen running around yet. But
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that one swarmed on me. Population was dropping and I'm like, yeah, something's up here.
I'm thinking that maybe I'll just give up on a honey crop this year. I think I'm looking at ordering some queens and doing some splits, late splits, and saying, well, we'll forgo honey this year.
Just ignore the honey. Man, I've got people asking me for honey and when are you gonna get some? When are you gonna get some? I'm like, I don't know when I'm gonna get any honey.
No, well, my neighbors were bugging me, and I've got some stored that's in quart jars. It's it's crystallized. I told them, well, I'll give you some if you want it. They did, so I gave them some.
Well, I don't even have that anymore. I'm cleaned out.
Did you buy a creamer this last year?
No,
No.
I wish I had a creaming machine, but they're really expensive.
Yeah. Well, you can make creamed honey, but it's kind of a pain.
Yeah, I've kind of come up with a method to make cream honey, and it works pretty well, but I think if I had a machine, it would come out even just a little better. I mean,
yeah.
I like my creamed honey, and people seem to like it, but I think it would be just even a little better if I had the machine, but I don't. I don't have any place to put it, even if I did have it.
I know as a kid growing up, my dad really liked creamed honey, and we had guys that would put bees on some ground we had, and they'd get dad some creamed honey every once in a while.
Hey, Lisa, how's your bees? Or Rochelle, how's your bees doing? Either they're still.
Must be muted, huh?
There you go. Hey, Glade, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay, sorry. I had a hard time unmuting.
Yeah, just.
So we have 9 hives now.
Wow, you've been growing. What are you doing?
Yeah, well, 7 of them are just new hives that have no comb. So we're just building out.
Okay.
They were just packages. And we have food on all of them. We have the bee syrup. So we're still feeding.
Yeah, you're gonna have to feed because there's
Yep.
no natural stuff coming in yet.
Right. I've seen pollen on them.
I got little blooms in my hay.
And my husband's got little blooms in his hay, but
Well, if
we're going to feed all summer long.
if you let that hay go to bloom, then they'll have something to build that comb with.
Right. Right. And that's what he does. He's been letting it go to bloom. So, but we're going to feed all summer long to see if we can get that comb built up. I've had a hard time getting that built. So we're going to see what happens.
Then we split one.
Keep the food on them. Thin syrup.
Yes.
Yes. You can even go a little thinner than 1-to-1. Like,
Can we?
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go like 3/4 sugar to 1 part water.
Okay. I will do that. What we did was we put, so I've only got 1 deep because I do the deeps, for my brood. So on these new ones, we've got 1 deep on them. And then I put the top cover or whatever on it, and we cut out a circular hole. And then my husband we've got like the 1 gallon or 2 gallon buckets. So he drew the circle around there, and then we put the tack holes in it, the thumbtacks. And so that just fits down inside that deep, and we put the top on, and it's working out pretty good for us.
Now, bucket feeders work pretty well.
Yeah, that's what we've got on all of ours now. I didn't have them before. I had those black ones that the bees would crawl down in and drown themselves. So I got rid of those and we put the buckets on them.
Top high feeders or in the frame feeders?
The top that has just the two sides, you know, that they can crawl up and
Yep.
yeah, I didn't like those.
Some people like them and some people don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have
I've got some of those, but my problem is they build comb in them.
yeah.
I hate that.
My problem is I can't build comb, so
Thin syrup, that's your key.
okay. Because I've got 2-to-1, is it? In there now.
Oh,
No, 1-to-1. Sorry. I've got 1-to-1 in there now. 1-to-1, yes.
so if it were me and I was making 1-to-1 syrup and I, made say 5 gallons of syrup,
Mm-hmm.
I would throw maybe even another gallon of water into that 5 gallons and make 6 gallons out of it.
Okay.
I mean, you can thin that down quite a bit. If you think about nectar is about 80% water. So it's like, that'd be more like 1 to 5.
1-to-5. Okay.
So
Will they eat
really
it
thin.
easier?
Say that again.
I says, will they eat it more if it's thinned down?
Oh, they'll go down on it.
Okay.
If there's nothing else for them to eat, they'll eat it. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it stimulates it imitates a honey flow for them too if it's a little thinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll do that because I'm assuming that I'll probably have to refill this weekend. So I will just make it thinner.
Just make it a little thinner. This
Okay.
is not an exact science with syrup.
Right.
If it's a little thick, it's a little thin. The bees don't really care, but this time of year, thin it down just a little bit.
Okay.
That'll
I'll
really
do that.
stimulate it to get going.
To build that comb for me.
Yeah, and where it's as warm as it is,
Mm-hmm.
they seem to build comb better when it's nice and hot like this.
Okay.
As long as they've got the resources to do it with.
Right. So how often would you check those since they're new packages?
I'd be keeping an eye on them every 10 days to 2 weeks, just like anything else that I,
Okay.
and you might not have to do, a deep dive. I would just peek in. The biggest thing is you want to make sure that the queen's still got room to lay. If she runs out of room to lay because you've been feeding them so hard and they've just packed out the brood nest with syrup and she's restricted in how much she can lay, then they want to go into swarm mode because they think, okay, we don't have enough space. So you kind of have to watch that a little bit, but my guess is they'll build out comb.
Okay.
I need to put one more on top.
Okay. We'll check them this weekend then and see what's going on.
Yeah, just make sure that queen's still got plenty of room to lay. She's still, you want to leave one frame of open cells that she can go lay in.
Okay.
And that's, you're in a hard spot because you don't have drawn comb.
Right.
You
And I
need
bought
drawn-
packages
Yeah, and you need drawn comb to get
to
For-
have,
for
yeah,
the
for her to
lay.
have room. Uh-huh.
and they need population in order to build that drawn comb, and they can't do population when she doesn't have room to lay, and she doesn't have room to lay because you don't have drawn comb.
Right.
You're just kind of in this catch-22 situation with a package and empty foundation.
Right.
And about the only way to get out of it is to feed them.
Right. And that's what we've done. We've had food on them since we got them.
So where are you located at? Do you have much beef pasture around you?
I'm in Gusher,
Okay.
and all I have is Russian olives, hay fields,
You're about that, coming from Vernal, you're about the first house on the south side of the road coming in.
Yeah, I'm where the hayfields are.
Okay.
The only,
I think I know where you're at.
Yeah,
So is the Russian olive already bloomed for you guys there?
it's just starting.
it's just starting.
Just, yeah.
That's a good source for them. They'll work Russian olive pretty good. But
I'm hoping they will. There's nothing else.
Yeah, me too, or I'm in trouble.
They have Russian olive honey this year, and that's all I get.
If they tell your husband you don't want he doesn't want that first cutting of hay till the 15th of July anyway. So
Right.
It'll be cut for
He
you.
says, no, it'll be cut before then, but he does let it go to bloom and he leaves it there for a little bit. So he likes his honey.
I need to come
well,
sneak my couple of hives down there by you.
Yeah. We have a bunch of hayfields around us.
We got yaks in here too.
We have yaks in here too.
Oh,
yeah.
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 How
I
close?
think I think yak's just about everywhere though, but somebody told me that the last yak, is it Steve Yak? Is he the last one that has hives?
No, Steve Yak sold his portion of the business to Selby Apiaries.
Right. Okay. So who's the other yak?
Robert and
Galen.
still have hives.
Well,
I
he
think
was
Lane's-
telling somebody he was going to retire.
Yeah, Galen supposedly was going to retire last year. His son Gabe, I think he was going to take it over, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Somebody said he was giving it up.
Well, he's
Yeah.
not a spring chicken, so
Yeah. But Lane Yak still has bees.
I haven't talked to Lane for several years. The last I talked to him, which was probably 6 or 7 years ago, he was still running like, I think he said 300 hives or something.
Mhm.
And I talked to Robert, oh, it was last fall when I talked to him. I still don't know how many hives yaks run altogether, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 5,000 range.
Holy moly.
Yeah, let's see, about what 8, 9 years ago, when they were trying to push this legislation or the law through the state legislature that you couldn't have hives within 3 miles of each other and so forth. They had about 10,000, the whole yak group together. Now I don't know how they were divided up. But.
Yeah, I don't know either, and I don't know how many Steve ran and has sold off to Selby, but Selby is still running bees, I think, in the same yard Steve was using before. And I don't know who, you go down the road and you see a bunch of hives and they're probably yaks. Are they Steve's? Are they Galen's? Are they Roberts? Whose are they? I don't know. I know one yard out by one of my locations is Robert, because I've talked to one of his crew and he says, oh yeah, that's one of ours. So I know that's one of Robert's, but
Yeah, he's got some over in the point right by those bees I've got there. They're within probably 300 yards. You can see them from each other. I can see them from my hives. Well, I can't really see them from my hives. They're kind of behind some trees, but my daughter's house is right there, and they're not even 100 yards from my daughter's house.
do you have any problem with robbing in the fall?
A little bit, but if I shut down the openings on my hives, it constricts it pretty good. And then I've got some robbing screens that I can put on as well that I made that look like the regular rob. They got 2 or 3 different entrances, and that. And if it looks to me like they're getting robbed much, I'll put those on.
Yeah.
But I haven't noticed it that much.
Hasn't been an issue.
But those hives that are there by Yak's hives, they make a good crop of honey. If those hives, if they're good strong hives, they'll make good honey. I mean, they'll make a bunch of it too. So it's a good location. And they weren't there last year because some people were going to build, or they pushed some stuff out, and I don't know where the hives went, but they're back there this year in the same spot. So, and it's a good spot. That's why they're back. But they still buy packages and stuff, because I can see over there, over on here on 2500 South, here in Vernal, they did the same thing last year, and they're doing it again this year. They bring a bunch of packages in, and they're still single deeps right now. And I think here just within the last little while, I noticed some of them had put another deep on some, but on some of them they hadn't. So
That's that yard out by me that of yaks. They've been in single deeps for a month, and then I just barely noticed that a couple of them they've added another box to.
yeah.
So they must have been packages as well. You know, I don't know if he just uses packages to replace dead outs or what, you know.
Whether he's trying to build or not, I don't know, but I know there are packages because I can see the old packages laying there.
They're still laying there. I had to go
Yeah.
drive down that road by the one by me, and see if there's any packages laying out there.
You can see the cages they came in.
Are they the wooden ones or the plastic ones?
Look to me like they're wood.
Is anybody seeing any brood issues like chalk brood and European foul brood or sack brood?
Little bit of chalk brood.
I don't know that I know enough to really tell. Sometimes I think I do, and then other times I don't know.
Just in my travels around a little bit and talking with some of the other people around the state, European foul brood seems to be the one that is kind of cropping up a little bit more. And I think that's probably because, you know, the beekeepers used to just automatically treat with terramycin just every year. That's just a matter of course. And terramycin's an antibiotic, which clears up European foul brood. But since 2017, and you have to get a vet to give you a prescription for that terramycin, I think a lot of beekeepers just aren't doing it anymore. And I think we're seeing a little bit of I guess, resurgence of European foul brood in some hives. As I'm talking with beekeepers around the state a little bit, they're seeing it more. Some of them are writing it off as just mites, but if you get really looking at it, it's most likely European foul brood, and it may be cropping up because the mites have weakened the bees enough that the bacteria is getting a foothold. But I think that's something you ought to kind of be aware of and watch. Let me share my screen here. This is a picture of European foul brood, and the thing to kind of keep an eye on is, notice how this larvae is discolored. It's brown, it's yellow. It's not pearly white. And then the other part of that you can watch for is, see, some of these are, the larvae is just kind of a pile of goo in the bottom of the cell. When they get really infected, the larvae kind of twists and in the cell, and notice how this one right here, it's not a nice C shape, it's kind of twisted in the cell. Picture's not that great, but it's the wrong color. And this is a really bad infestation of European foul brood, but European foul brood seems to affect mostly the larvae in the larval stage, and American foul brood, which is the other one, that you have to watch out for, but it's not quite as, I don't think it's as prevalent. It seems to affect more of the pupal stage. So once it's capped, I think you see more of that. But if you're seeing larvae that's discolored, just kind of a pile of something in the cell like these are right here, up here, there's something in the cell. It's not pollen, it's not nectar, but there's something there, but it doesn't look like a larvae anymore. If you're seeing that kind of larvae in the cell, something's up. You know, get somebody involved. Either take a close-up picture and shoot it to me, and I can help maybe identify it, and then we can, or you can call the state bee inspector and they can help you identify it. If you're in Duchesne County, you can call the Duchesne County bee inspector. That's Todd Walker, and he can help you with it. But this is just one that I think we kind of miss just because we're so focused on mites, and we should be, but don't let this one slide by. If your larvae's not looking pearly white, then something's up.
And you can buy those test kits at like IFA or Cal Ranch sometimes for foul brood.
Right. There's a European foul brood test and an American foul brood test, and you can buy those and test as well if you suspect you've got something going on. But just something to kind of keep an eye on, that it's there. It's a bacteria. I think it's probably like any other bug that, you know, we all carry viruses and bacteria all the time, but our immune systems are capable of just keeping things at bay until we have a weakened immune system, and then the bugs take over. And I think the bees are the same way. When they get weakened, which is typically by the mites or because of lack of food and stress, then the nasty pests and diseases creep in and start to manifest themselves. I think European foul brood's in the hive, in most hives, all the time at some level. And the bees are usually able to keep it at a very low level, but under stressful conditions, I think it starts to manifest itself.
And I think you will see those perforated cell cappings too with that European foul brood, won't you, Glade?
Yes. The bees kind of go in and kind of start to open up that cell just a little bit. I guess I've got a slide here for American foul brood, and you can see with American foul brood, the cell caps start to sink into the cell, and then like this one right here, this is kind of perforated, and the telltale sign with American foul brood is take a toothpick or a matchstick and stick it down in the cell and just kind of mix it up in the cell gently. And then when you pull it out, if it's snotty and stringy, then you got a problem. And this is the one you really got to be careful with. You know, if you see something like that, then get a hold of somebody pretty quick. The other ones aren't such a big deal. I mean, here's what chalk brood looks like. You get these dead mummies on the bottom board. Basically, it's the larvae that's been infected with this fungus, and it just kills the larvae. And as it does it kind of mummifies that larvae in the pupae, and it turns kind of a chalky white, and then after a while it just turns black as it ages. And usually we see this in the spring, but this year's been such a weird year. it wouldn't surprise me if you still see this now, but this usually it just clears up on its own when it gets warm. Feeding the hive can help. If I start seeing this in a hive, I really kind of watch that hive the next year. And if it still has it, if it comes back in the same hive the next year, then I start thinking about replacing my comb in that hive and getting rid of that comb. I don't know that the fungus can overwinter out here, but there's not really a treatment for chalk brood, but most of the time it'll kind of clear up on its own as the bees start to build and it gets warmer. It's a fungus, so humidity in the hive can be a problem, and that's why we see it first thing in the spring. But this one usually isn't much of an issue. If you start to see bees with these deformed wings, though, that's most likely a sign that your mite load is way too high. Not always, but most likely your mite load is just way too high. And this deformed wing virus shows up in hives that have really high mite counts. And usually if you can get your mite counts back down to where they need to be, then this symptom goes away. You don't see any bees with deformed wings on them. And if you're not doing mite counts, it's probably time to start. We did a couple of mite counts on hives here in my yard 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and I'll do mite counts from here on out. Just about every time I go out to my yard, because I have multiple hives in a yard, I have 6 or 8, I'll usually sample 2 just about every time I go out. And then the next time I'll sample a different 2. And I'll do that the rest of the summer just to keep an eye on them. It's not hard to do. It's quick. It's easy. If you're not familiar with doing it, I can show you how to do it. It's not as hard as some people make it out to be.
What are you seeing on your mite counts so far?
A 0 and a 1.
Yeah, I've got one hive that I've seen 2 in, the rest are nothing.
Yeah, so they're still looking pretty good. The one that had 1 mite, it came from a hive that I overwintered. Probably didn't get a fall treatment of formic because it was probably small enough. Formic's a little bit strong for a small hive, and so I'm really careful about. And I was going to come back and treat it with some Apigard, and I just never did. And then I hit it a couple of times with oxalic acid vapor. It did just fine through the winter, but it's just slow. It's behind everybody else. And it's one of the ones I'm feeding just because those small hives just they're not really building up too fast. 2 users that are Zoom users. One of them I know is Frank. I don't know who the other one is.
Want to see my ugly face? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I know which one you are, but I don't know who the other Zoom user is.
This Kirk Robbins.
Oh, that's Kurt. Oh, that's Kurt. How's your bees?
Doing good. Well, overall, I've got one. Most of them have done really good. But I've got one that had lost a queen, and so I've got to I need to get a queen. Do you have any queens?
No, I'm gonna make some here.
Let me know when you get one. I'm gonna split some off of the others and I'm gonna let these die off and then start over.
Do you have any honey yet?
Do I have any honey yet?
Are they making any honey yet?
Oh yeah.
Really?
But it's not. I don't have any capped honey yet. But yeah, there's honey in the hives. So the 2 that have are really strong. They're, you know, they'll capped honey, but there's, you know, every time I've got in there, they're pulling honey. So
I said, are your bees over at Huntington's?
no, in Vernal.
At Maryland Huntington's place there on Fifth South?
Oh yeah, yeah, honey. Yeah, I got you. Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought those were yours, but I wouldn't.
You've been spying on me, huh?
Yeah, I'm keeping track of you.
Good. Somebody needs to.
If it's a good location, I'm gonna be over there.
Well, it seems to be pretty good. I don't know if it's as good as it was in the middle of town, but there's better things that come with it too. So
She has your bees and she buys my honey.
that's what she told me. She's good.
She's relative.
Her son asked me. Oh, that's right. She's a price.
Yeah, she's a price. Well, I don't have anything else. Does somebody have questions or something you want to talk about? Is there something you would like me to put together for next time? Nobody's saying anything.
Just figure out how to get them to make some honey.
If the weather would cooperate, I think that'd be the first step.
Yeah, certainly couldn't hurt anything.
I can give you a little bit of an update on the Utah Beekeepers Association, if you're interested. We're working on the meeting for next year in February. And we'll probably we're going to change locations. It's still going to be in Salt Lake, but the location's going to be a little bit different. We think we should have a little bit more room. And we're trying to work out to do some breakout sessions so that we just don't have one big session. We maybe do like a track for commercial and sideliners and then a track for beginner beekeepers. Is that something you guys, does that make sense for those that come and have come? We're also looking at doing another kind of a field day for anybody that wanted to come. And last year we did it down in Delta at Stevenson's honey house. And we fed you lunch. And then we had some discussions there at their place. And then we went out and actually got into some of Stevenson's hives. We had about 40 people come. It was a pretty good turnout. And we're looking at doing it again this year. We're not sure where yet. We might do it back out at Stevenson's. We might do it somewhere else, but haven't quite decided yet.
So when you try to get speakers, Glade, what's it costing to get those guys?
Some of them charge a fee for that. Some of them don't. Some of them just say, pay my transportation and my lodging and I'll come. So most of the time, and sometimes the fees are $200 to $500, and some of them don't charge anything. We've done a few over Zoom and they haven't charged us a thing. Sometimes because we do it over Zoom, their fee is pretty minimal.
Okay.
Most of the time, we've been fortunate. Most of the time, the fee is not unreasonable. But I think, Becky Masterman, I don't know that she even charged us. We just paid for her transportation and her hotel.
A lot of those folks, you're probably a year or 2 years out to get them, aren't you?
Yeah, sometimes it's pretty hard to get on their schedule. Yeah, sometimes it's pretty hard to get on a schedule. And we start about July, August, trying to get on a schedule in February. And sometimes it works out. It's worked out really well. And sometimes we've had somebody say, well, let me check and let me see, and then come back and 2 months later and say, well, I can't do it then. And so we're scrambling, trying to find somebody else. And
Come back and say, well, I've got a better offer. What they're really doing is this. I'm waiting for a better offer.
right. But that's what we're working on. There is the legislation that went through this last legislative session. Basically, what happened was the legislations basically said that there's going to be a committee formed. Some of the committee members will be, I can't remember, one's the state bee inspector, one's this the commissioner over UDAF, and then there'll be several of the state, the county bee inspectors on the committee, and then they're supposed to draft a recommended policy for the state as far as things like how many hives can you have in one location, and if you're in a residential area, do you need to keep your bees so far from the fence line, and do you need to provide a flight path so that it pushes the bees up and over. The intent when we started last fall with the legislation was to eliminate some of the silly requirements that some of the cities and towns have. Some of the requirements are just almost ridiculous. And so essentially what happens is beekeepers technically are breaking the law, but they just nobody says anything anywhere. And the cities and towns can't really, they don't have the enforcement, but some of the restrictions are just kind of silly. And here we are, the beehive state, and some cities and towns would just as soon not have a beehive in it anywhere.
Yeah.
So the intent was to kind of have a reasonable state policy regarding beehives, and basically state that the cities and towns can't adopt a policy that's more restrictive than what the state is. But we were trying to keep the state policy to be really wide open and not be restrictive really at all. We'll see what happens as this group gets together. They don't get together until like November or something is when the legislation's written really kind of weird. And it was really the Utah City, the Utah League of City and Towns that forced us into this mode. We don't really
Are
like
they the
it.
ones who killed the legislation then, Clay?
Yep.
Yeah, they're the ones that really
They
put the boss.
pushed, yeah, they pushed for the change in the wording,
Yeah.
and they got it changed, it's all because of them that we're having to go through all this. So we're trying really hard not to end up with something that none of us as beekeepers like. At the moment, we'll see where it goes. Nothing's going to happen for a few months here, and it may just be a recommendation, and it may not really get adopted as policy. We're not sure how much teeth this is really going to have when we're done, but that was not our intent. In fact, our intent was to, at the state level, basically say, you can keep bees anywhere in the state. You know, as long as you're not causing grief, causing real problems because you're dropping, 300 hives in one location. And as long as you're being reasonable with your beekeeping and you're not in the middle of downtown Salt Lake with 30 hives in your backyard, that's just probably not a good practice. But there's no reason you couldn't have 4 or 5 hives in your backyard.
Glad this hurt.
Yeah.
If you look at the League of City and Towns, they've got a lot of clout and power on the Capitol Hill. That can be, you don't know what's going to open up from that.
Yeah. We managed to push the legislation so that it was originally written so that there was only one county bee inspector on this committee. Just one. And we got that changed to where they have to have several. So we're kind of hoping that we think we've got Joey Caputo in his office on the same page as us, that, hey, we really don't want a whole lot of restrictions on beekeeping. And we don't, we would prefer that the beekeepers aren't just flying under the radar, not registering as a beekeeper. We prefer them to register as a beekeeper so we have a better idea of what's out there, but we don't want to put any restrictions on them the way some of these cities and towns have, which some of them are, if you read some of the ordinances, they're really ridiculous. It's kind of crazy.
But how many of those town cities are enforcing those ordinances now?
I don't think any of them are really
Yeah.
enforcing them unless somebody complains.
Yeah. Well, one thing about it, maybe we just maybe we just let the sleeping dogs lie.
Well, and that was part of, do we not rock the boat? What we were really worried about, there was a couple of other legislation, more local legislations that we'd heard about, rumblings that were trying to get pushed through that were really kind of ridiculous. And so we were trying to head that off a little bit. We know we have beekeepers in some of these places that the city, according to the ordinance, it's pretty obvious they would just as soon not have a beehive anywhere in the city. And so these beekeepers are technically being illegal about the whole thing and just keeping quiet and hoping their neighbors don't say anything. And we're trying not to make outlaws of the beekeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a risk of proposing some sort of legislation, and it was looking really good right up until the end, and then the Utah League of City and Towns jumped in out of the blue and just at that point we were more than willing to just retract our proposal and just let it die. But that's not what happened.
Is Joey Caputo on that committee?
It's not uncommon for legislation to do that. These guys are watching you all along. They're just waiting until the very end, because then they don't, you don't have a chance to fight back or anything.
Kirk, what was your question?
I'd say, is Joey Caputo going to be on that committee?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he'll stand strong forever for beekeepers.
Yeah,
I've worked a lot with him on some other things related to bees and stuff. I think he'll stand up pretty good for. At least I think he will. I
think he will too. And we've talked as a board for the Utah Beekeepers Association. We've talked to Joey directly and said, hey, and as this legislation went through, we were in communications with Joey and trying to get things to kind of push in a little different direction than they were going. And I think he'll stand with us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We're not too worried about that. So we're kind of hoping that with his backing, and as long as we can kind of keep the county bee inspectors all on the same page. And I'm not sure how many of the county bee inspectors will be on the committee, but more than one, which is what the original plan was. If we can keep the county bee inspectors and Joey Caputo and his office kind of all on the same page, it's going to carry a lot more weight when it comes down to the end of what are we going to actually propose as a policy.
Well, and if it gets close and things are going the wrong way, we might, they might get everybody together and have them get a hold of their senators and representatives, and because there's a lot of them that can help us out too.
Right. We're hoping that we can kind of establish a policy that's very reasonable, and that we can do that with policy and then not have to go back through the legislation and try to push that through the legislature.
Yeah.
It may actually turn out to be in our benefit in the long run to do it this way, but that all really will depend on the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food and how they stand. If Joey's boss will stand with Joey, then I think we have a really good chance of coming out with some very reasonable policies as far as, how many hives can you really have in one location? If you're on a 1/4 acre lot, 20 hives in your backyard just probably is not a good idea. But, a couple of them is still okay. And some of the cities basically say you can have one hive, that's it. And if you've ever tried to keep just one hive alive, it's hard. And besides, beekeeping is addictive, so you can't just stop at one.
Yeah.
Well, but it's hard to, if you have one and something goes haywire, you're done.
Yeah.
You have no, unless have a good friend or somebody that's going to help you out. But yeah, you just can't sustain it. And it's things like that are going to happen occasionally.
Probably every 2 years, you're going to have to do something with that queen, or at least every 3 years at the longest. And if that queen, you're either stuck buying a new queen from somebody or hoping they raise one. And if she doesn't get mated well, or, something goes wrong, she gets eaten by a bird when she goes out on her mating flight and never comes back. And you're done.
Well, all you can do is hope that reason comes through, and I think overall, I think the Department of Agriculture should stand with us. I would almost bet.
We think they will. We think Joey's influence there with his higher ups will be enough there that they'll go, well, if this is what Joey's recommending, then we're going to stand with it.
Yeah. Let me know if I've got some connections with the guy that's not right directly above Joey, but 2 above him. And he's a good guy. He used to be our ag inspector out here in the basin 20 years ago. And he's a good, reasonable guy.
You probably dealt with him quite a bit from the mosquito abatement.
Yeah. Well, not a ton, but yeah. When we haven't worked together, I've ran into him here and there over the last 20 years. He's been gone out of the basin for probably over 20 years. But he's a good, reasonable guy too, so.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, then I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks, Wade.
Thanks for all you do for us.
Okay.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.